Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm actually a fellow colleague, but I'm not sat here in a work capacity. I'm sat here as somebody's daughter. This is my lovely dad, Peter Gerald Docker, born in Rochdale, the 3rd of June 1945. My dad left school and went straight to work in the family printing and stationery business, where he worked alongside his younger brother, his dad and his granddad. He loved his job and he never retired. In his younger years, he was an avid amateur sportsman. He played for the local football and cricket teams, and in his later years, he kept his foot in the door by being on the committee at Rochdale Cricket Club. Around 1978, my dad met and married my mum, Janet. I came along shortly after, followed a few years later by my younger brother, Philip. And we had a lovely childhood. I have such happy memories of growing up. Around 10 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with 2 really rare blood disorders, one of which can transform into leukemia. My dad took it in his stride and just got on with his life, just having regular checkups along the way. Around the same time, my mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and she deteriorated quite quickly. My dad did everything he could to care for her at home. He modified the family home to look after her, until unfortunately everything became too much and she had to go into a care home. At that time, I was quite relieved for my dad. I felt that he could carry on and live his life now without having to worry about looking after mum as much. Unfortunately, a few months after that, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia. Initially, he was treated as an inpatient at Royal Oldham and he went a few times a week for some treatment. After a lengthy period of time, it was decided that he required more intensive treatment, so he was to be admitted as an inpatient for a week or 2. I lent him my travel suitcase and I helped him pack, and he made me sneak in a little bottle of whiskey and a couple of packets of cigarettes. I dropped him off and off he went, and he settled in really well. He was given a lovely side room with its own bathroom. He made friends with a few of the patients and he got on really well with the nurses. He seemed in good spirits every time I went to visit him, and I vividly remember on one occasion he walked me back out to my car so we could have a sneaky cigarette, and as I was going he gave me a kiss on the cheek and he said, "See you later, old girl," and that was our thing. I was his old girl and he was my old boy, and that was the last time that he ever said that to me. Unfortunately, during the night times and early in the mornings, my dad had been showing signs of confusion. He was pulling his lines out and taking his oxygen mask off. He was adamant about going to the bathroom even though he had a catheter fitted, and he wasn't compliant with the call bell. So it had been decided that for his own safety, he required one-to-one supervision during that time. Unfortunately, that information wasn't documented in his care records and it wasn't passed on to the day shift. And on the 18th of October 2017, he was left on his own. At 8:30 in the morning, my dad got out of bed to go to the bathroom. And on the way there, he fell and banged his head and sustained a subdural hematoma. And he died less than 18 hours later. I can't tell you what I did yesterday. I'd probably struggle to tell you what I've done so far with my day, but I could relive that day from the moment that I got a phone call to the moment that he died like it was yesterday, because that is etched into my brain like a living nightmare that will never go away. I got a phone call at 8:45 to tell me that my dad had fallen and could I go up, and I wasn't worried at all. This was my dad, it was my mum I had to worry about. My dad was always fine. I walked into his bedroom and I walked straight out again, because that was not the man that I had seen a couple of days previously. The man laid on the bed, couldn't open his eyes, he couldn't speak. He just lay there moaning and making really strange noises. Family and friends came to see him and I thought he was still going to be fine. Even when the consultant came in and told him there was nothing more that they could do for him, I still believed my dad was going to be okay. And looking back, I was obviously in denial. It was myself and my brother who were with him when he passed away. It was 2 o'clock in the morning and we were both sat on either side of his bed in a chair with our eyes closed, and we weren't asleep. And I just remember sitting there and all of a sudden it dawned on me that something in the room had changed, something was different. And I opened my eyes and took one look at my dad and ran out for the nurses. And that was it. My heart was broken. That was my lovely, wonderful dad, just gone. And up to that point in my life, I'd been really lucky to have never experienced a pain like that before, and it overwhelmed me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I had to beg my GP to get me some help, and I was so lucky to be able to access grief counselling, which I had every week for a year, and without that I just don't know where I would be today. Because of the circumstances of our dad's death, it had to go to inquest, and that's a really difficult period of time for a family, as you had to wait about 6 months for that to take place. And it makes the grief process so much harder because you're left in some sort of weird limbo, because you always know there's something else coming up. Sitting through the inquest was really difficult because you have to relive and hear everything that went wrong all over again. But sitting there watching the nurses break down, I couldn't be angry anymore. Something changed inside of me. Mistakes do happen, but they have to be learnt from, which is why I wanted to share my dad's story today. As hard as it evidently is for me, if by sharing my dad's story and what happened, this can prevent one more family going through what my dad and we went through, I would sit here and say it 1,000,000 times over. As cliche as it possibly sounds, the few minutes that it takes to write a few notes down, the few minutes that it takes to pass on a bit of information, it literally can mean the difference between life and death. Now, my dad may never have left that hospital because of his illness, but I will never know that. We were denied that time with him. That was taken away from us in the most traumatic of circumstances, and we have to live with that forever. And that suitcase that I lent him and helped him pack for his stay in hospital, that's still in my bedroom, packed, because it's the one last thing that I still can't bear to do.